everyone. Welcome again to Socially Joe, and welcome to episode 31. I am joined by my guest, Jeannie Cochran, who is by far the best person I've met so far through networking, and I can't wait to introduce you to her. But before that, I want to do a quick shout out to Poddex, where I use them on my show. And if you go to poddex.com, you can get your own deck of cards and you can use them on your interviews as well. So back to the show. So with that being said in mind, Jeannie, I met you through Kate O'Neill, through networking, and I had you on our Kiss My Keister show, and you were a great person to know. So I wanted to learn more and let my listeners learn more about you. So tell us a little bit about yourself, Jeannie.
Well, first, thank you. You're so kind. Thank you. And it was so much fun to be on Kiss My Keister and have my crazy cousin, Victoria Vecchia, come on and talk to you as well. You're very patient to put up with my family. But as Storygenie, which is my alter ego, Storygenie is all about entertaining children, but it's also about what they call edutainment, about education. And what it does while kids are having great fun and being entertained is it teaches them the wonderful power of words and rhyme and rhythm. And it empowers them to have better language skills and have better verbal skills and to be more confident about words in general. And children can learn amazingly, especially through rhyme, repetition, and rhythm, which are the three building blocks of poetry and music and so forth. So, that's my mission in life, to help children find the power in their life through the power of the use of words.
That's great. I love it. So I have to ask, and I'm sure my listeners want to know, what was your favorite TV commercial that you ever, did?
Oh, my favorite TV commercial was probably a Marilyn Monroe, Elvis Presley commercial where, as a writer, producer, and creative director, I hired the world's #1 Marilyn Monroe impersonator. Her name was Bettina something. Anyway, Bettina, she'd won prizes around the world as being the world's best Marilyn Monroe. And she was dating an Elvis impersonator, which just is bizarre, but that's okay. They later got married. So she's dating this Elvis impersonator, and for as good a Marilyn Monroe as she was, that's how bad an Elvis he was. So I used her, but I didn't use him. And I did a TV commercial for a client who sold something called a thermopacker. And the thermopacker was an insulated bag, and it kept hot things hot and cold things cold. So I recreated the scene from the movie Some Like It Hot with Marilyn Monroe and Tony Curtis, and I recreated it on the beach. And my Tony Curtis fellow sitting in the little cabana chair, if you remember the movie, with his yachting cap on and his sunglasses and his ascot around his neck. He's sitting there reading a newspaper, and our Marilyn Monroe goes swinging by him in her classic white halter dress, swinging the thermopacker bag. And he says, "Hot little number." And she stops. And she says, "Oh, no, it's a thermopacker. It keeps hot things hot and cold things cold." And she pulls a Coca-Cola out of the bag, and she says, "See?" And she wipes the sweaty, cold can across his face. And she says, "You should buy a thermopacker, too." And off she goes skipping down the beach and leaves him, completely flabbergasted by being left with a cold can of Coca-Cola. So anyway, that was my one favorite TV commercial, and we actually won a couple of awards for that, being clever. And then my second favorite commercial, because it's kind of a tie, was an Einstein commercial I created using an incredible actor done up as Einstein, and he was fabulous. I mean, he was just a perfect Einstein. And it was for a furniture company, because I do have a bizarre brain. I really do have a bizarre brain. And I dressed him up as Einstein, and I had him working on the blackboard doing E=mc² and all these calculations. And we cut away on the blackboard to the furniture store and their special on whatever the furniture special is of the day. And Einstein looks at the camera and he goes, "Oh, Lawrence Furniture, schmart, right?" And he's tapping his forehead. So it was very funny and had funny lines in it. And Einstein was great. And we won an award with that. We won a couple of Addies. And we got a notice from the Einstein estate with all of the rights to the Einstein image, a cease and desist order that we could not use Einstein's image anymore. So anyway, those are my two favorite commercials. Marilyn Monroe with Tony Curtis on the beach, reenacting Some Like It Hot, and then Einstein doing Schmott, Sweetheart, on a furniture commercial.
Oh, that is awesome. So you've, from what I gathered and what I've heard and all this other stuff, you have grown in the advertising, film, TV, commercial business that you know about. So this kind of led you to Storygenie, and I know you had told me about it, and I want to learn. I know you mentioned it a little bit at the beginning, but can you dive a little bit deeper? Like, what made you start doing Storygenie, and why did you really want to do this, and how does it help?
Well, it actually was an offshoot of being a writer, producer, and a creative director in commercials and in television when I was in Las Vegas, Nevada. And one of my clients was a stage show that was at the Aladdin Casino, which doesn't exist anymore, but the Aladdin Casino had a stage show called Country Tonight, and it was all country pop and country current. And they hired me as a producer and a writer and et cetera to adapt the stage show to a TV show. So I worked with the music director and the show runner, the show producer, Karen, and she and I worked very closely on it, and we created this 13-episode TV show version of Country Tonight, and it was huge, and it was a hit, and it won awards, yada, yada, yada. Well, Karen and I discovered while we were working together that we were like long-lost sisters. We were both so musical, and I had told her that, I've been a poet all my life. First thing I ever published, I was 13, and I got published nationally in the Anthology of Young American Poets as an upcoming poet. So I was telling her about my poetry and that I write poems for kids all the time, and I wrote them for my own kids, and she wanted to see them. So I showed her my poetry, most of which is quirky and funny and silly. And she said, "Oh my gosh, I would love to set these to music. These are just fabulous, and they have this great iambic pentameter, they have this great meter, they would be great for songs." So I said, well, have at it, have fun with it. So we started playing with some of my kids' stories. For example, there's one called Schlurple Purple about people who eat purple food. And it's like, when a purple popsicle starts to drip and purple goop runs down your lip and so on and so forth. So she makes it into a little song. And suddenly we have this song called Schlurple Purple, slurping it down. Schlurple Purple, making no sound. Schlurple Purple, slurping it up. Schlurple Purple there in your cup, and so on. So we had so much fun. We ended up making like 6 or 8 of these songs up out of my poems and her music. And then I said, you know what? I've always wanted to have a children's show. I've always wanted to entertain children with rhyme and rhythm and repetition and music and dance and jokes and so forth. And that's how Storygenie was born. We started talking about how do we make it into a TV show. I told her that my kids, when I was little, they used to say their mommy was Genie from the TV show because I have blonde hair and I was wearing a ponytail, and because I joke and kid around with them and tell them stories. So my children actually started telling people that their mother was like the genie in the bottle on the TV show. So story, I love to tell stories. Genie is my name, Storygenie. So that's how that came to be. And then my youngest son, when he was 3, inspired me to do a book because he had the terrible 3s. He didn't have the terrible 2s. I think I told you this story. And one day he was being so awful. And I said to him, Keel, stop. Why are you being so mean to Mommy? Why are you being so mean? And at 3 years old, he looked up at me and said, it's not my fault. I got bit by the meanie bug. So I wrote a meanie bug story all about him. And that was what became the book that tied to the TV show. So we ended up with the Storygenie TV show, and we ended up with a book called The Meanie Bug and Other Silly Creatures that came as book 1 in the Tales from the Storygenie. There you have it.
That's awesome. So give us a little bit more, like, how does the Storygenie help children? Like, does it help get them motivated, interactive, get them to, sound out words?
Yes, and all of that. But what it first does is it makes them laugh, and it makes them sing, and it makes them sing along and learn the words. Because, for example, the Storygenie theme song, which is totally nonsensical, but kids love it, is Storygenie, sticky picky wiggle bun, Storygenie, kitty paddle paw, Storygenie, winky wiggle diggy dun, Storygenie, hee hoo ha. That's the chorus. Well, kids absolutely love that, and they all want to learn how to sing it, and they all start to sing it, and what that does is it exercises the lips making phonic sounds. It exercises the mouth. And because those sounds and those words and those nonsensical things come together very quickly, to enunciate them well, you really have to use your lips, you really have to use your tongue, you really have to use your enunciation of words. So without them even knowing it, they think they're just having fun. It's kind of like some of the TV commercials of yore when they had lyrics. A lot of them don't now. But when it used to be to all beef patties, special sauce, lettuce, cheese, pickles, onions on a sesame seed bun. That's a tongue twister. Most of my work is tongue twister type oriented so that it challenges children to hear it, learn it, repeat it, and enunciate it. And that is a formula for great building blocks to speak well. And the more you speak well, and the more vocabulary you have, and the more power you have over the use of words, it empowers you in countless other ways. It empowers children to speak with more confidence. It empowers children to speak publicly, to express themselves better, to communicate better. And as they get older, to present themselves in a more confident way, whether it's in the workplace or whether it's in the educational place or whether it's dealing with teachers or whether it's thinking through a term paper. It's all about communication and expression and basically at the bottom of it all, power over words. And the way I reach children to help empower them with words is through rhyme and rhythm and repetition and music and silly poems. So that is my reason for being, that is my...
That's your story, you're sticking to it?
That's my story, I'm sticking to it. And children do learn amazingly well things we don't give them credit for learning. If you think about songs that you learned when you were young, songs that caught your ear, how many of those do you still remember and don't even realize you remember until you hear it on the radio and start singing along? It's amazing how the power of music and words.
I was going to say, I didn't remember all the words, but when you said Davy Crockett, I remember that song so long ago, but do I remember it? No.
Mm-hmm. Probably because you didn't know the words and you're a little young for the Davy Crockett curve. That was when I was a toddler when Davy Crockett was out. So it might not be your zeitgeist. It might not be your zeitgeist. You might definitely recall themes from TV shows. I think we were talking about, different themes. I can remember all the words to them. And a lot of people can. They just don't realize it. Like, for example, a horse is a horse, of course, unless, do you remember Mr. Ed before I go off on a tangent here?
Nope. I remember Mr. Ed. I remember the Munsters. I remember Addams Family. I remember sort of Hogan's Heroes type of things, Gilligan's Island.
Right.
So.
And if the themes came on and if you heard them, you would probably sing along and remember more than you think you do because you tie the words in your brain. They're tied to the tune and they're tied to the rhyme and the rhythm and the repetition. If you think about the Addams Family, if I heard the theme right now, if I heard the music, I could plug in all the words. And most people could. And it proves the linkage between rhyme and rhythm and repetition, because you hear it over and over again, and the pattern that it makes on your brain. So that's the approach that I come from. I come from the approach of using music and using fun and rhyme, repetition, and rhythm to help children develop those speech patterns and word skills and dialogue and language. I'm working on a radio program for Storygenie right now, and I will use some words in there that kids will probably ask a mom or dad, what does that mean?
So you mentioned that you had written some books previously, and I wanted to go a little bit more deeper into it. And I know you said one was inspired by your son, the Meanie Bug, but how many books have actually you've written, and what books inspired you as well?
Well, there's 5 books in the Storygenie, Tales from the Storygenie Silly series. And the first book